working with one's hands is still popularly seen to be low-level work, devoid of intellect. The acquisition of skill is a cognitive achievement. Perfecting one's craft, learning to problem solve, to make and repair, involves a great deal of intellect. Craft is about an attitude towards one's materials, towards the use of one's tools, and to the journey of learning. I think that's really what defines a craftsperson. It's about the never-ending possibilities of learning about your trade.
When I first began thinking about craft, I suppose I thought of it in a very traditional way. So I thought about handmade pots, I thought about weavings, I thought about wood carving, maybe. Over time, what I realized is that craft is completely pervasive. So it's on building sites, it's in design studios, it's in scientific laboratories when someone needs to make a new piece of equipment. It's just absolutely everywhere. I think with the rise of the internet, with the sense that we're globally connected in ways that we never have been before, and also with the sense that corporations, governments, and other large power structures are becoming so complicated that we have no way of even understanding their operations, there's a tremendous emotional drive back to the specific, back to the immediate, back to the physical, back to a sphere of operations that we can actually understand and control.
It's a reaction against mass production, the mechanization of things, the industrialization process, all of which were seen to kind of alienate the individual from what they were actually working on. Craft is seen as a way of making the craftsperson in a certain way autonomous, giving them the power to oversee a project from beginning to end. So it very much creates kind of a sense of place in a world that is increasingly making a lot of us placeless.
All the sensations we have of working with our hands, touch, roughness, all of that, like the sensations we have, physical sensations of smell or hearing, all that sensory knowledge is part of what we're thinking about.
Woodwork, like any handicraft, involves a combination of mind and body working together, but with the full sensory apparatus. Hearing is extremely important. Hearing the tools against the wood. And you know whether you're using the tool correctly by the sound it's making. Sight is often quoted as the most important sense, believe it or not, for a carpenter, because not only are they looking at a finished piece, but they're constantly judging the planar surfaces, the angles that they've cut, the proportions of things with the eye. A good eye is equated with being a good woodworker. And then, of course, touch, the haptic senses. It's not just feeling the wood for its smoothness or feeling the direction of the grain, but also feeling one's tools. Tools and materials speak back to the woodworker, and it's through the tool that a material speaks back. It's now demonstrated by the neurosciences that the end of a tool becomes the point of touch for the human body. When one becomes habituated in using a tool, becomes expert at it, their sense of touch, in fact, becomes redirected to the end of their tool blade. In the production of something, one grows, one cognitively and physically expands one's horizons because one learns new tasks, new ways of solving problems, new ways of making and undoing. And that allows one to both kind of develop physically in the kind of the technical production of a task, and also conceptually, the way one understands the materials that one is working with. The best way to learn something practical is not to read about it in a book or to sit and listen to a lecture, but rather to pick the thing up and use it.
I think it's much more about understanding that one must dedicate oneself and even sacrifice oneself to the acquisition of skill, however long that takes.
Physical knowledge and mental understanding have a very deep connection to each other. To be able to become a master craftsman in that sense with a physical skill takes about 10,000 hours. That's about 4 hours a day for 4 years, 4 or 5 years. That'll make you professionally skilled at something. Personally, I don't believe this is really a skills society. You look at something like a computer, how many people know actually how to program their computer? When we think about objects being user-friendly, user-friendly means we don't really understand what we're using. I mean, what we're having in modern capitalism is the fact that people just move from job to job in a way that doesn't have a narrative structure. If you move from, say, working 6 months on one project, and then 6 months to something totally different, you may use the skills that you developed in your first project in your new project, or you may not. You may just have a serial experience of work. So you won't necessarily be in a situation where your new job builds on what you had before. It may be just the same job in a different place. Ultimately, craftsmanship raises real questions about the structure of capitalism.
I think that craft serves as a useful counterpart to this increasingly scrambled, increasingly open job situation that we have today. It seems like jobs are more fragmented than they ever have been before. So you have interns, you have part-time employment, you have people skipping from one company and even one industry to another all the time. And of course, there are many wonderful things about that. You know, you get to experience much more of life by moving from one job to another very quickly. What you don't get through a flexible relationship to your work is a sense of deep understanding of what you're doing. And so I think that craft serves as a useful counterpart to this increasingly scrambled, increasingly open job situation that we have today. If you say, it's very important that people learn how to work with their hands, one thing that you might be implying is that it's very important that they stay in a menial job and that they don't ever become doctors, lawyers, etc. So while on the one hand, absolutely supporting the idea that we need to turn back to skills training and really take seriously the idea that vocational education needs to have a renaissance all around the world, we also need to make sure that that's done in a way that doesn't foreclose options and doesn't stick people into a box that they can't escape from.
Many of the woodworkers that I trained with, especially the older ones, had come to woodworking because they wanted to leave behind consumer capitalism, world market forces. They wanted to have more control over the things that they were doing in direct connections to the people that they were going to be making for. And this democratic idea that one can make things that are going to be available, financially accessible to everyone, it remains a bit of a pipe dream, really. And there's that constant tension between craft as kind of a road towards democratization, towards kind of greater social cohesion, and the reality that many of the things that craftspeople are producing are in fact serving an elite niche in the marketplace.
Students no longer have the opportunity to understand what it is to be skilled in a deep way. So they have some sample experience of all of these different practices, but they don't know what it is to acquire mastery.
What you really want to look at are these decisions that 16 and 17-year-old students who are not going to get a university degree, the choices that they're making. And there you're seeing an enormous shift. And as I say, it's a shift which our educational system, at least in this country, is not responding to. It's a different kind of world. It's a world in which you have a personal relationship to the people who are using what you're doing, as well as a personal relationship to the others who are helping you make it. And I think that's one of the great satisfactions of craftsmanship today.
It's just something you can't get tired of, either as a maker or a user. And I suppose that's what keeps people coming back to it again and again. It's not only that it's challenging, it's just hard to learn a craft, but also that the greatest master that ever practiced a given medium, on the last day that she or he spent in the workshop, still felt that there was more to learn.
Young middle-class kids are funneled through formal education. If you're going to make it, it means that you're going to go to university and have a degree. The whole vocational route is seen as a cop-out for those who didn't quite make it in the classroom. As a society, we really must expand our understanding of what knowledge is. Knowledge is not merely book learning. Knowledge is being able to perform tasks beautifully with the body. This embodied knowledge needs to be reevaluated by our society and given the status that it deserves. Making something beautiful is an expression of knowledge.